Hey there, welcome back to our Sky Tonight program. My name is Seth Mayo, curator of astronomy for the Loma Planetarium at MOAS, and in this edition of the program, we're covering the dates of March 28th through April 3rd. We're going to start things off by talking about Jupiter rising out of the glare of the sun in the morning. Then we'll mention two planets getting very close to each other by the very end of the week, and we'll wrap things up by talking about the celestial highlights for the month of April. So, let's get to it. As we continue to look at the planetary party going on in the morning sky right now, we can find that Jupiter has just emerged out of the glare of the sun. And if you don't see it now, you can look just above the eastern horizon, just before the sun rises, and there you'll find usually the second brightest planet in the sky. So there we have Jupiter, of course, the largest planet in our solar system. So with Jupiter, now that it's moved through the glare of the sun, going through solar conjunction, now for the rest of the year, Jupiter will be somewhere in the morning or eventually the evening sky, since Jupiter doesn't hang around the sun for too long, and we'll have to wait till we go all the way around the sun again for Jupiter to get near the sun's glare once more. So of course, this is not an inner solar system planet, so it doesn't hang around the sun like Venus and Mercury. So it spends a short amount of time near the sun, and then we have a lot of time to see it in the evening or the morning sky. So this is the beginning of the week in the early morning. This is actually Tuesday morning, March 29th. But as you go through the week here, and if you're looking very low towards the east, you may notice Jupiter getting a little bit higher in the sky. We'll go to the 30th here, and then off to the 31st at the end of March, and then we'll move into April, seeing it get a little higher in the sky. But it doesn't move too quickly here because Jupiter is much farther from the sun than the inner planets that we belong with. So it moves a little more slowly in our sky against the backdrop of the stars. So here's April 1st, and we'll get to the 2nd, and then off to the 3rd here on Sunday morning. So you see it has inched a little bit higher in the sky, and you have a better view of it. And every time I mention Jupiter, I have to always mention looking at it through binoculars or a telescope, because it's such a great object to see. Because as you get closer to it or magnify Jupiter, you may have a chance to see those beautiful cloudy bands across its gaseous globe. But what's really awesome are seeing those moons around Jupiter. They look like tiny little stars that move pretty quickly through the night or the early morning. And I think it's so cool to see moons of another planet with your own eyes. So that's always great. Again, Jupiter is very low in the sky right now, so that may be a little tough with binoculars or a telescope, but you can look forward to seeing more of this planet. And later in the episode, when we talk about the celestial highlights for April, you're going to see Jupiter get very, very close to another planet. Now, if you've been watching these episodes lately or paying attention on your own to this area of the sky in the early morning, not only is Jupiter there, but of course we have a few more planets that have been very close. We talked about in last week's episode that we had Venus, the brightest planet in the sky, and then Saturn and also Mars, along with the moon in a very small circle in the sky. That was at the beginning of the week, and they're still all very, very close to each other, with Jupiter rising very low towards the eastern horizon there. So looking at these three planets, they are really close, Venus being, of course, the brightest one, since it's a planet that gets close to us and it has a very reflective atmosphere. But it's great to pay attention just to the right of Venus at these two planets here that you may have been noticing getting closer and closer, with Saturn and Mars. They're not as bright as Venus, but they will stand out as these non-twinkling star-like objects in the sky. So this is on Sunday morning, the 3rd of April, and you'll see they're very close. I'm actually going to skip ahead to even Monday morning, April 4th, because by the time the next episode comes out, we'll have moved past a really nice conjunction between these two planets. They're already close here now, but as we move to April 4th here, they're going to get even closer. And this will actually work for April 4th that morning, or even Tuesday, April 5th. They're still going to be very close. So this is a really, really nice conjunction between Saturn and Mars. And of course, Mars glows a little bit red. And they're getting really close. Just to help us understand it, let's kind of zoom in even more. And we'll turn on our angle measurement tool here in Stellarium, which is very useful. So we're going to move across here from Saturn to Mars, just like that. And there you see roughly a 26 arc minute separation. So this may vary. I might not be doing this perfectly, but definitely less than half a degree. Just remember, 30 arc minutes is 1/2 a degree, 60 arc minutes is 1 degree. And as we've mentioned before in some recent episodes, about 1/2 a degree is the width of a full moon. So you can expect these two planets getting closer to each other than a full moon's width, which is really great. So that will be really nice if you have a chance to look at these two objects getting close, or maybe you get a chance to take a picture of them. You'll notice the color difference between the two. Saturn, of course, has a very kind of milky beige color to it, as opposed to Mars, which has that kind of brownish red color. So you will notice the difference between those two there, and that will be kind of a nice contrast between a very large solar system planet here with beautiful rings and an inner solar system planet that we find here with Mars that is smaller than Earth. So that's going to be great to have this really tight conjunction between these two planets in the early morning sky towards the east. Again, the east and the morning have been a great area for planets, with Venus nearby and Jupiter rising as well. Looking ahead at the celestial highlights for the month of April, now that we've already talked about the conjunction between Saturn and Mars, by the morning of Tuesday, April 12th, we have another conjunction going on, and one that you won't be able to see with your naked eyes, at least both of the planets at the same time, and that is between the planets of Jupiter and Neptune. So we find Jupiter here, and that has risen even higher in the sky by middle of April. And what's kind of interesting to know is that the planet Neptune, the 8th planet in our solar system, very far from the sun, will be getting very close to Jupiter. So for us to find it, we actually have to search this in Stellarium to do so. And when we do, you'll notice it almost looks like Jupiter is situated right on top of Neptune. But let's kind of zoom in and take a look at this very close conjunction here. So as we zoom in, you can see Jupiter and its moons, but now we can see the little dot of Neptune. And although Neptune looks really small, remember again that it's really far away from us at about 30 astronomical units. That is 30 times the Earth-Sun distance, which is about 2.7 billion miles from Earth. So that is really far away. So no wonder that Neptune, even though it's about 4 times bigger than Earth, looks like a little dot. And even through a large telescope, which you would need to see this, it will still look like a little dot, but maybe kind of a bluish, more roundish object. So it does look a little different than a star that may be nearby. Moving on to the early morning of Friday, April 22nd, we have a meteor shower coming up, and we've kind of had a lull for meteor showers lately. So it's nice to have a fairly well-known meteor shower coming up for this month. And it's actually one of the oldest known meteor showers. It may have been observed and noticed 2,500 years ago by the Chinese. So that's kind of neat to know the history behind what's called the Lyrid meteor shower. So this meteor shower typically happens in April. It comes from a comet called Comet Thatcher that leaves behind a debris trail that we're moving through at this time of the year. And for this particular meteor shower, like many, the early morning is probably best, especially when the radiant point is really high in the sky in the 4 or 5 o'clock local time frame in the early morning. So you can notice the radiant point here, and it's called the Lyrids because it's situated near the constellation of Lyra, the harp. That actually has a really bright star inside of it known as Vega, which is part of the summer triangle that we like to talk about for much of the year. And so this radiant point is near that harp, but it's also kind of near the constellation of Hercules, which sits in this area as well. So it kind of sits between Hercules, that mighty warrior and hero, and Lyra the harp that we find right there. But it's still technically called the Lyrids, named after this particular constellation there. So it is not the most active meteor shower you can see all year, with a peak hourly rate of about 18 meteors, so about 18 meteors per hour. With all the right conditions, you do have to contend with a moon in the sky, not the largest moon, near about a last quarter moon or about half full. So that may make it a little bit more difficult to see these meteors, but you still have a chance to see some, especially when the radiant point for the Lyrids is situated really high in the sky. For the last week of April, we're going to head back to the early morning sky towards the east, where we're going to find more planetary events going on, and there's some really cool things to look forward to. So this is on Monday, April 25th. You can see the beautiful waning crescent moon here, not far from Saturn right there, and Mars there. You can see those two planets have moved quite a distance away from each other. But let's continue through the week here and watch where the moon passes by. So as we continue through the waning phase of the moon, this is on the 26th and the 27th here, you'll see the moon pass by these two planets that have gotten even closer to each other, move to the 28th, and then to the 29th, and those two planets, which are usually the two brightest planets in the sky, Venus is right here, and there you have Jupiter, are getting really close. This is going to be a really nice conjunction between two very bright planets. And the closest they're going to get is right at the end of the month on April 30th. And that conjunction brings them really close, definitely less than half a degree. And so this is going to be really nice to see these two planets shine as these beacons in this beautiful conjunction going on. So it's really nice to have all these planetary conjunctions happening throughout the month, especially the one on April 30th between these two bright planets in our night sky. And let's take a look at some of the best stars and constellations that we find for the month of April in our evening sky. And where we'll start with is the west, where we notice some of these leftover wintertime stars and objects that are beginning to set in this area of the sky, but you still have a good chance of seeing them. So of course we have the likes of Orion. There's Orion's belt here. Orion is still in a good position in the sky right now, which is quite nice. Not far from Orion, of course, we have the brightest star in the sky, Sirius, that Orion's belt points to, the dog star. To the right of Orion, more to the north here, we can still see the V shape, the nose of Taurus the bull. Along the back is Pleiades. We're starting to see Taurus get pretty low in the western part of the sky. A little higher up, we have a little more time to see the Gemini twins way up here above the club of Orion. And on either side of Gemini, we still have a good view of Canis Minor and this bright star known as Procyon, another one of Orion's hunting dogs, and the oddly shaped constellation of Auriga the charioteer with that really bright star Capella that you may have noticed before. So these are still left over from the wintertime. You still have a decent view of them, but you may notice you'll have less and less time to see them as they descend towards the western horizon. Since we are definitely in the spring sky, that brings us to talking about those spring constellations that are hard to miss at this time of the year. Really the best of all of those is Leo the lion that we find right here with his head that looks like a hook or a backwards question mark. So we can turn on Leo's outline there, the great lion. And around Leo are some dimmer stars, but constellations still worth looking out for, like Hydra the sea snake. Even in front of Leo, you may catch a little glimpse of Cancer the crab. Those are very dim stars, but it's worth mentioning. We look kind of near the tail end of Hydra. You may find yourself looking at the stars of Corvus the crow or even Crater the cup. Those are a little lesser known, but those stars sometimes stand out. As we move over to where the moon is at this point in the middle of the month here, we'll find the great constellation of Virgo the Maiden with a really nice star here known as Spica. And to the north of that, a star that we commonly associate with Spica or connect with Spica is that of Arcturus, which is part of Boötes the herdsman. In our next episode, we'll talk about these two constellations of Virgo and Boötes and the stars inside of them. This is a great time of the year to look for those two constellations. So that's really nice to find those characters from ancient storytellings of the sky. And one more thing I'll mention, because it's a great time of year to see it, is the Big Dipper that we find right here. It looks like a giant spoon in the northeast, rising a lot higher up now at this time of year, which is part of Ursa Major, the Great Bear. And I just can't forget to mention that Ursa Major, especially the Big Dipper's bowl right here, kind of points you to the Little Dipper towards the north. And of course you have the famous North Star, also known as Polaris. So a good time of year to see those stars and constellations. So even though there's still a lot of wintertime stars to look out for that will probably catch your eye, those spring stars are now dominating the evening sky, and you'll notice them more and more. Well, look at there. You made it through another edition of our Sky Tonight program. Thank you very much for tuning in, and if you're in the area in Daytona Beach, please stop by the Museum of Arts and Sciences. We'd love to have you here, and definitely catch a show in our Lohman Planetarium. We have shows every single day, and if you want any more information about those programs, please check our website online. With that, we hope to see you back here again. Take care, and of course, happy stargazing.